Great. Thanks very much. So, what I'd really like to talk about is really sales enablement and technology. So, I'm very passionate about it. I've always been curious about technology and what we can do and how can we be more effective originally my journey starts with operations, and how can we be more effective then with sales enablement and technology. So with me being very curious about it, I'd love all of you to also be curious as we go through this, just thinking about how you use that technology to drive effective sales enablement. And it really is a journey that we're on. I think we're all enablement professionals here, and it's not just that it's a switch, it just suddenly turns on and then suddenly you got this great enablement. It takes time, which we're all aware of. So my journey started back in 2000. And I was fortunate to start working. It was actually, it wasn't even called SaaS then. We were a company out of San Diego in a high growth. And it was interesting when you started to have this very high growth organic revenue where you've got to sustain it. And we didn't have a lot of the technologies in place to be able to do it. So I'm going to be covering off that as we go through it. But I want to give you just some numbers of the organization I'm in now. So I work for Sage. I think we're in London. Head office is actually out of Newcastle, but we've got a presence here in London too. It's a big company. Second biggest software company in Europe, biggest software company in the UK. So just to give you an idea on some of the numbers, we're 13,000 colleagues, market leaders in Canada, UK, Ireland, France, Spain, and South Africa. We got a strong presence in the US. That's where we focus on a lot of our attention now. And we're present in 23 countries. Our market cap, actually as of last night, we're at £8 billion now. But what's really interesting is when we get to the financials. So we're doing 1.8 billion now in pounds in turnover. But the two very important metrics, and Simon Gills is actually here, used to be an ex-Sage person, but this is what we focus on. Is 83% of our total revenue now is recurring revenue. And if you looked at the stats, that's been growing at about 50% over the last few years. That's how fast we've been transitioning the business from an on-premise business to cloud. And now 52% of our customers are on subscription. So while I'm giving you the stats, I just want you to start thinking about the enablement that needs to happen to make this happen. Customers, 2 million. We got a lot of customers, and that means we've got a lot of small customers. So how do we look after those customers, service them? How do our sales organizations be able to do that as well? Over 28 million people are paid on our software, on our Sage payroll, and that's 1 in every 3rd person here in the UK. And then just so you know, on our software, we're moving 4.2 trillion annually. So it's a big business, and it's really starting to move at pace now as we move to the cloud. So our strategy, again, this is the Sage strategy, which Enablement we got aligned to. So very simple. Our purpose is the way we transform the way people think and work so their organizations can thrive. Our vision is to become a great SaaS company. So everything we do, it's about SaaS within the business. And what's important is about for our customers and colleagues alike. So if we think about the 3 strategic pillars that we focus on, it's customer success, it's colleague success, and it's innovation. And I'm going to be spending time in those buckets because when you think about sales enablement, it's how do we align to the corporate strategy to make sure that we're going to deliver on these goals. If you think about the sales enablement function, right now I report into the Chief Marketing and Enablement Officer, and we are it's under marketing. The reason for that is that we're driving the change of what needs to happen, and sales enablement is critical to that. So everything we do has got to align to these pillars, because if we're not successful in this, the company's not going to be successful. What's important towards the end there is you're going to see the metrics. And I'm going to talk about metrics a bit later because it's important. So if we think about the enablement and the technology, it's got to be underpinned by the metrics and how we measure ourselves. So NPS, we all know NPS well, renewal rates. Thankfully at Sage, we sell mission critical software. So our renewal rates have got to be at 100% or more. Colleague success, we focus a lot on voluntary attrition, and eNPS. We've got surveys that go out regularly to gauge the employees within the company and what do we need to do to improve things. And then innovation. So this is core and key to the whole strategy as we move all our customers to native cloud products or our connected cloud solutions. So going back now, it's early 2000, but now I'm going to take you to 2006. One of the greatest things happened, which I'm still very thankful today for Mark Benioff, the Salesforce App Exchange. So I don't know if everyone remembers that, but that was a big day because that opened up the whole SFDC platform. I don't know if anyone actually knows the story about Salesforce.com, about what happened, but Mark went back to his CTO and told him, I need you to open up the whole platform. And he goes, why would we do that? That's all our IP. He says, it doesn't matter, you've just got to do it. And they went back and they opened up every single point of Salesforce.com. And the whole reason was to launch the App Exchange so that everything could plug into it. And I was grateful for that because I was working with some very smart, much smarter people than me in IT. And they were able to take what I was thinking in my head and actually then go build it in Salesforce. And that really started to change the game on how I thought about how we could enable things using technology and enablement. And what it did is it allowed us to start moving at speed. And that meant we could keep up with the growth that we were seeing within the company. So it was just the beginning. It was still early days. There was a lot happening. You'll see as I go through this presentation, the technologies we're using today has only really come out in the last few years. But it absolutely gave us the foundation and the thought process to start thinking about how do you enable sales colleagues, customer success colleagues, and even customers with technology. So now we've got the technology starting to get to where we need it to be. Has anyone seen the pyramid of learning? So the science behind how we learn. Matt? Cool, so a couple of you have. This stuff is really interesting. So, you know, I want to touch on this because it's the science around how we learn. It's all well and good that we can put all this great technology in place, which you'll see in a bit. But if we don't understand how we learn, how do we know that we're putting the right technologies in place or the right programs of what we're doing? So I want to just take some time and reflect on this as we go through it. I'll go a bit slowly because I think this is critical to everything in what we'll do. If we're lecturing, so I'm lecturing up here, you're only going to retain 5% of this information. If you're reading the slide, great, it's another 10%, or you'll retain 10%. And then audio visual, you're going to retain about 20%. That's not a lot. I mean, think about it. I mean, you're going to walk out of this room and you're going to remember a fifth of what this whole presentation and conversation will be about. If we were doing a demonstration, you'll be at 30%. That's still not a lot. That's a lot of resource we've got tied up in doing demos and doing presentations in front of a lot of sales colleagues over a number of days throughout the year. What I'm interested in what's below the line, and that's really discussion groups. How do you start enabling when you have discussion groups? Because then you're picking up 50% of what we're training. But if you can practice by doing, you're up at 75%. And that's what's interesting is if you think about enablement and why role play is so important. When I look at our regional directors and what they roll out within the regions, is it's very quick training sessions. Do you remember the days when we used to pull in a whole lot of sales colleagues for a 3-day event? Does anyone remember them? Did anyone do them? I can see it. And that was, I mean, that's how we thought. And we thought a lot of people would train that way. I remember going to go get a sales methodology and bring in salespeople and do that. If I'd known this, there's no ways I would have ever done that. Because that's not how we learn. So it's practice by doing, and you've got to be practicing, so short snippets. But what's really big is teaching others. So how do you get your sales team to start teaching, to be super users and do that? Because that's where you're going to retain all the information. So I highly recommend that you look at something like the pyramid of learning, look at your enablement functions and go, what are we doing today and how does it align to what the science is telling us? Does this make sense? Sort of? I'll give it 5 more seconds. So we know training gets us predictable results. Okay, what happens before and after has more effect on the impact than during. What's really important is there's got to be deep business linkage. I've always found with a sales organization, if you start training them on, well, this is the new product we sell and this is what we're going to be doing, this is how you need to position it. And if that team can't understand how that links to what we're doing as a business, you lose the teams. You've got to create that business linkage. What's the business challenges we're trying to solve? How's it going to benefit? And to a sales team, how are you going to make more money out of this? And let's ignore comp plans. We had a conversation about that a bit earlier. Okay. Training transfer happens when there's a sense of accountability and expectations. You've got to set the right expectations. And then lastly, but super important, is a sense of accountability increases when the manager is engaged. And for me, the last point is it's just critical into everything we're doing. I don't know if you've seen me present before, but I'll let you know that there is no way we can do all the enablement we want in the world. If a manager does not reinforce it, we're done. It just doesn't happen because their job is to make sure that they create the environment for the sales colleagues to do what we need, all the customer success colleagues of who they are. And if they're not going to create that environment for their sales colleagues, the enablement is not going to, all that great stuff we're doing is not going to land. So managers are critical to it. So moving on to metrics. So I wanted to touch on this because metrics, it's got to underpin everything we do. We've got to be able to measure what we're doing in enablement. It's hard, but over the last few years, I've changed my thoughts on what we actually measure with enablement. And Serious Decisions have helped. I think some of you have got, I'm sure you have worked with Serious Decisions, but they've got some really interesting frameworks now about how to measure our impact. And so that we can manage upwards, which we need to do, but also that we can actually just understand the impact that we're having on the organization in a way that makes sense. So this is for FY20. This is what the teams that we're going to be focusing on. I wanted to share this. I don't know if it'll help, but hopefully it will. So when we think about onboarding and training, so if we align to the strategy of what you saw earlier, why don't we measure it by NPS? So that's what we do now. Any onboarding we're doing or any training we're doing is all done by NPS. So we track on an NPS score. Best in class, 55. So any training you're doing should be over 55. If you're not, then you need to look at, is the training landing, is it working? Certification and completion rates. We got sales teams that sell software. Okay, great. So if you're selling a software, where's the certification for that software? Has everyone completed their certification? And what are those completion rates? I'd love 100%. It's not really realistic. But if you've got 90% of your sales team that's selling a product certified on that, you're pretty confident that they know how to position that product and they know what to do. They know how to handle the objection handling and so on. SSI score above 60. I'm going to talk about LinkedIn Navigator in a bit. We just want to maintain SSI above 60 globally. Probably could get higher, absolutely, but this is global. We're on 62, 63. Interestingly, with that stat, with LinkedIn Navigator, before we had the right programs in place, we were down at 41. And that's a very tough conversation that I have to have with my boss on why we're spending the amount of money we spent on LinkedIn when we're driving an SSI score that low. So set the right levels of where you believe your organization should be. Content usage. Matt's here from Seismic. What's interesting about that is how do you make sure that you maintain your usage? So what I look at is we're not looking at what's being downloaded right now and how effective it is because we don't have that technology in place yet. But what we are looking at is that is the usage maintaining month over month, quarter over quarter? We've got a year of data now. Are we still seeing people hit those same pages at the same levels that we did? And interestingly enough, when they're not hitting those pages, it's a red flag. And when we go look into it, we find that there's old product content on there, even to the point there was an old product sitting there, but you could see it straight away. So just simple ways to measure what's happening. SFDC releases, I'm going to touch on in a bit. And really what this is about is I've got a team that's focused on SFDC effectiveness. It basically, this team looks at how Salesforce works within their environments and we release. So we used to release about every 2 to 3 months. We now do our releases in Salesforce every 2 weeks. So because we need to move at speed and pace, especially as we roll out Salesforce across the organization. EMPS, which I spoke about earlier, super important to me and the team's foundations days. Sage is very big on how many days we give back to the communities. 5 days per year. I'd like all of the teams to be able to do that. But it's important that we track this. It's not just about the metrics of sales enablement, it's about the sales enablement team as well. So that's why these metrics are up there. And then productivity. So interestingly about productivity, and again, we're talking about this morning, is it a metric that sales enablement can control? I was going to open it up. If anyone would, do you feel that sales enablement can control the sales productivity metric?
Not exactly. That needs sales, combination of sales, enabling sales leadership, especially.
Agreed. Any other thoughts?
The answer is yes, if it's going up, no, if it's going down.
Sorry, the answer? Yes.
If it's a good story, you want to say
Exactly. If it's going up, I'm going to claim it.
it's not a direct. I don't think there's a connect the dots connection between.
It's yeah, and I'm it's an interest of time. And so I fully agree with both of you. I think it's. I used to run when I look in the past. I used to use sales productivity as the metric for the sales enablement teams, but when you look at it, we have an impact on it, but we don't control all of it. There's a number of variables to it. Should we be looking at it? Absolutely, because it's guiding us on what's happening and where we're going. But I think if you have your teams and you say, I'm going to tie myself to sales productivity and that's how I'm going to measure my team, I think your team's not going to, yes, you can do it, but is it the right thing to do? So that's why I have it as last. I'm not saying that it's not important. It is, but we don't directly impact that. So, and that's been my mindset shift. I always used to do it by sales productivity, and now I'm saying there's a lot of things above that we should be looking at that we've got direct impact on.
But don't you think there's a period of time, like whatever, you've got to measure this over a period of time, and if productivity isn't going up, I agree with you, there's no direct connection.
Yeah.
But if it isn't going up, is
something. Yeah, there's something wrong, and that's what I'm touching on now. So sales productivity by tenure. So looking at the data. So when you take your sales productivity metric, you've got to look at it over time. And also what you've got to look at it is by tenure. And interestingly, every time I've done this, when you look at a sales organization, it's year 3, and this is just the companies I've worked with, it could be different in your organizations. It's year 3 when sales productivity is the highest. So then I'm thinking, okay, great. So that means year 2 would be the second highest and year 1 would be the first. Interestingly enough, year 2 is the lowest. So it's like, well, what's happening? How come then year 1 is my second most productive year out of the first 3, and year 2 it falls? And when we looked into the root cause analysis, what it was is the top performers leave after the first year because they don't feel they're making enough money or they're not happy. You have your mid segment basically now getting up to speed, and hence why in year 3 they get more productive. But wouldn't it be great if that we could actually get that to be that your year 2 was more productive than your year 1? Because a lot of time and effort goes into people leaving and so on, and that's when you need to start looking at attrition. So sales productivity, looking at it over time and by tenure is really important. You've got to look at it, and to that point, if it's not going up, there's something wrong. And just so everyone's aware, when we talk sales productivity, it's a simple calculation. You take in the number of salespeople that you've got, and you're dividing it by the bookings or the revenue, and it's an average. And because it's an average, it's really difficult to move. So that's why you want it to, and over time, even more so, you need it to be heading up in the right direction. So I just wanted to spend some time on that because it is important, but I think you've got to make sure that you measure the things that you have got direct impact over. So now I'm going to get to a very busy slide. It looks simple now, but this is the main slide of the presentation. So I just need to make sure I'm on time here. So structure, skill set, and mindset. You've got to have your structures in place. You've got to have the skill set, and you've got to have mindset. Now, for me, you can go, you always, you'll be in conversations, right? You just need to change the mindset of the organization. It's not that simple, because you've got to have the right structures in place and you've got to have the right skill set. So when you've got that, that's the combination that really is the performance equation, okay? Because that's when we start having impact. So what do we mean around the structures? Ultrify. Ultrify is guided selling. It's a new technology over the last few years that integrates in Salesforce, native on Salesforce, that helps guide salespeople through basically your sales cycle. You set milestones. It helps you with political maps. It helps you with account planning. It does a lot of good stuff. So in our medium segment, we've now integrated Ultrify in the last year, or we brought it in. should have had this the other way around. Salesforce is what we use, and that's what we're now rolling out across the organization. 6 Sense. I don't know if some of you have worked with 6 Sense. So 6 Sense is intent data, very, very smart technology that looks at what customers are doing without them even realizing. Have they been to your website? What keywords are they searching? It's very smart, technology that's looking at the intent data of when a customer might be in a buying cycle. It then uses that, and then it can predict when we should actually contact that customer. So very powerful stuff. If you're running any ABM strategies, you need to be looking at 6 Sense. LinkedIn Navigator. I'm blown away how powerful this platform has become over the years. I mean, LinkedIn, it really is worth the money when you get it to work the way it needs to. We're in the process of integrating it in Salesforce. It's remarkable. The latest version of LinkedIn Navigator can tell you if that person is still in the company or not. How nice is that? Your contacts, you can now automatically see if they're still there or not. And then you can, all the workflow and logic you could put behind that. SalesHood. SalesHood's now our enablement platform. Very powerful, because what SalesHood has done, it's allowed us to build repeatable, scalable enablement by a very basic concept called huddles. So you can create a huddle, you put up a video, watch the video, go do something, go take an action. And this is really powerful when you think about, well, how do I scale an organization? How do I get the same training that we've just delivered rolled out across the world to all our 2,000-3,000 salespeople? And SalesHood gives us that capability. So very powerful. It really focused on video storytelling. And I'll get to the innovation that we've been doing around it. WalkMe. I think a lot of you got WalkMe in-app learning. How do you it's not guided selling, but you're just helping someone through, okay, you need to go do this, you need to go do that. Again, just taking away that work of where you have to go to someone or email someone about how to do something. WalkMe can do it. Really important, but what's important about WalkMe is you have to have the right type of person that knows how to write the stories or the right language so that you can guide someone very smartly through the system. So that we're in the process of rolling out now. But I want to let you know, all that technology we've done in the last 18 months. So there's a lot happening within the organization, and actually InsideSales.com as well. I know they've just rebranded, so I'm using the new branding. But Inside Sales, we've also just rolled out to our lead teams. And we're just thinking about that from a process flow standpoint. But what's, enablement for me, it's how do you integrate that with all these technologies and make it land? Because when you look at that is a lot to take in for your salesperson. It's got to work properly. So you've got to be thoughtful about it, have a strategy, sequence the work. Our skill set program, we've got Selling Through Curiosity with Barry Ryan. I think some of you know this. We selected this. I call it a sales skills program. I don't call it a methodology. And the reason why is because all of this for me is the sales methodology, everything we're doing here. So Barry Ryan, whichever sales skills program you choose, that's what we've selected. And that's just being curious. I think you guys know the program. If you need to know more, just let me know. But we're rolling that out across the organization at the moment. And then with the mindset, so we used Gazen, which is the decision-making cycle. And this is really the psychology around how a customer makes a decision. So what we really push for is outside-in thinking. It's not just all inside out. So everything you see there is all inside. And we're thinking, okay, hold on, what about the customer? So when we get to mindset, it's called the decision-making cycle. It's really the psychology of how a customer makes a decision. And again, back to the science. You can't argue with the science. We all make decisions. We generally think we use the rational side of our brain. It's not. It's the emotional. We use the emotional side that makes the decision for us. And that's important because that's why our sales teams are so important to connect with the customer. So that helps us with the mindset. So I know a very busy slide, but that's how we think about the enablement journey and sales enablement and technology. And really what that, driving that performance equation for high impact and high performance sales teams. So innovation is critical to everything. We've got to be predictable. It's got to be repeatable, consistent, and scalable. There's no ways in the Sage organization we'd be able to run enablement if we're not able to do all this. And that's why innovation is critical. We've got to innovate. So what have we done? When you saw that slide earlier, we've taken things a bit further. We've gone and taken Selling Through Curiosity, and we fully integrated it into Altify. First time it's ever been done. So when you look at Altify now, it's got STC completely embedded in the guided selling map that we're doing. We worked with Altify and Selling Curiosity to do that. Sixth Sense and LinkedIn are working together to see how we can do the political maps. But we're driving these engagements. We've gone to these vendors and said, we need you to integrate. We need you to do this because we need to be more efficient and effective on our side. And that's allowing us, again, to be predictable, repeatable, scalable, consistent, and then scalable. One important part, before I start finishing off, is motivation. So people are going to be motivated. It is very difficult to enable if someone's not motivated. Okay, and that all comes down to knowledge, skills, and really big thing for me, attitudes. You've got to have the right attitudes in your organization. People don't have the right attitude, it's very difficult. I used to work with a sales leader, and she always said to me, as long as they've got the right attitude, we can train the rest. And it's true. People got the right attitude. That's what we do. We're an enablement. But if they don't, and you got a bad apple, that's a problem. So you got to get rid of the bad apples. Well, in the ways that you can, in the good ways. And just make sure everyone's motivated. Okay, so in conclusion, because we're in the UK, and I have to do this, I'm South African, I like rugby. So when England won in 2003, okay, so Clive Woodward, how England won was because the basics were done right. And I still remember a lot of those games, and it really was. They just didn't drop balls. It was the basics. And they won a very successful World Cup. This year, I didn't put up 2007, but 2019, South Africa won the World Cup. But what's interesting about this story, and it's how games have evolved. Rassie Erasmus, the coach, this is a statement from him, and this is, I'm going to explain how South Africa won from his point of view. So it's been scientifically proven that at the end of the game, more oxygen is being used to keep tired bodies moving than their brains thinking clearly. Okay? So I believe that it is at this critical stage that a game is won and lost. So this is what Rassie Erasmus thinks. So what did he do? So you've got substitutions that you can make throughout a game. So in the last 4 games of this World Cup, and 3 of those were the knockout stages, you normally change 5 of your forwards and 3 of your backs. That's your 8 subs that you did. And he said, no, I'm going to change 6. Because my forwards are working more, then my backs are going to be working. And he did that because this is what he believed on the science. And if you look at those games, South Africa outperformed each time. If you go look at the stats behind each of those games, each time he made the substitutions. And it was just that switch from what the norm would have been to what he did. And that allowed, he believes, South Africa to win the World Cup. So I'll end off by just saying, we've got to look at the science, which we've got a lot on now. Use the technologies and make sure that you develop programs that are going to land in your organizations that use all this great knowledge that we now have. So thank you. Appreciated the time. I'd love to connect on LinkedIn if you want to. I'd love to hear your stories on what you're doing within your organizations, because I'm very passionate about technology and what you can do with it and how we enable our sales organizations. So thanks.
Any questions?
Thanks.
Anybody? I actually had one. With the amount of technology you guys are rolling out, what are your tips and tricks as far as adoption?
Yeah, so adoptions, it's an interesting one for me. We've got a lot of metrics that we now run in Salesforce that actually look at what adoption is happening within the technologies we have. For me, it's buy-in. So that's how you're going to get technology adopted. I think if you come into an organization and you say, right, you just need to start using this because this is the way it needs to be, I think you tend to fail. What I find is when you go into the organization or you go into the sales team and you show them why or how this will benefit them, setting those expectations, that's what I find that helps drive the adoption.
Are you pushing through sales management to kind of attain that buy-in? Are you guys partnered with sales management, or are you partnering directly with the sellers to kind of get that buy-in?
Well, it's management at the start. So I think what we find is that with if the sales managers aren't engaged, then it does becomes a problem, and they don't create that environment. So the sales managers are absolutely critical into any adoption that we're doing. So what we tend to do is when we choose technologies or we choose the way things are done, we always get that signed off by sales leaders. So once the sales manager has done that, it makes it easier for us then to go implement. So it's not coming from top down. We've even taken it a bit further now. We don't even drive it from a central function anymore. So we'll take the work on us to negotiate with the 7 big regions we have. We'll negotiate with each of the MDs, each of the sales leaders to agree that this is what we're going to do. We make sure that it's global and connected, but once we've got that buy-in, then it doesn't have to be driven from us from a central function down. It can be driven regionally up.
Very cool. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Scott.
All right. Thank you, Werner. All right. Next up,